Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into higher ed, looking at how universities are handling, all this generative AI stuff.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride since ChatGPT came out.
For sure. Remember all the headlines about students using it to cheat? Every university seemed like totally freaked out.
Totally, yeah. And it's interesting, right? Because just a year later, they've actually figured out what to do. We've got research and guidelines to look at today that show universities have gone way beyond that initial panic and created some really detailed policies.
So are they all in on AI now, or are they banning it, or is it somewhere in between?
It's funny. A lot of them are actually embracing AI.
Really? I wouldn't have guessed that.
I know, right? It's surprising. There's this research from McDonald and her team, and they looked at all the top U.S. research universities, the R1 schools, and found that a whopping 63% of them are encouraging using AI in classrooms.
Wow, 63%. That's way more than I expected. So what's the thinking? How are they using AI in class?
Well, it's not like they're bringing in robot professors or anything. It's more about using AI as a tool, something to help students learn and even learn about AI itself.
Okay, so instead of replacing professors, it's more like a high-tech teaching assistant or something?
Exactly. Like some universities are suggesting assignments where students look at AI-generated text and try to find the bias in it, or they're comparing their own writing to what AI comes up with. Some are even teaching prompt engineering. Like how to write really good prompts to get the best results from the AI.
Prompt engineering, that's a new one.
Right. It's like learning to speak AI. But, so it sounds like AI is becoming part of the curriculum. But what does that mean if you're, not a computer science major? Is this just a STEM thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. It feels like something that would be super relevant in STEM, but not so much in other areas.
Well, that's where it gets interesting. A lot of universities actually see AI as a way to totally transform how we think about writing and critical thinking. And they see this across all disciplines.
So it's not just about coding. You're saying AI could change how we do things like writing and thinking, period.
It could, yeah. Imagine AI helping students brainstorm ideas or organize their writing better, or even giving them feedback on their drafts in real time. Some people think this could be huge, especially for students who struggle with writing or who, didn't grow up speaking English.
That makes sense, yeah. It's like having a super-powered writing tutor available anytime.
Right. But of course, like anything new, there's pushback. Not everyone's thrilled about this.
What about the professors who aren't as excited about AI? What are they doing about it?
Well, about 27% of the universities in the study are actually, actively discouraging using AI in their classes, and they're getting creative about it. Some are recommending things like oral exams or big group projects, the kind of stuff that's harder for AI to just, spit out an answer for.
Yeah, I can see that. It's not like you can just plug those into ChatGPT and get a good grade.
Right. And some places are making students bring in personal stories or use specific course material in their work, making it way harder to just use AI-generated content.
That's pretty clever. Is it working, though? I mean, AI is evolving so quickly.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like a moving target, right? Some universities are even admitting that AI detection of those tools designed to, catch students cheating with AI are basically a losing battle.
Really? So it's like a constant arms race with AI always a step ahead?
It feels that way, yeah. The tech changes so fast that every time someone comes up with a new AI detection tool, boom, there's a new AI writing tool that can get around it.
It's crazy. So we've got universities figuring out how to use AI and how to stop students from misusing it. But what about the ethics of it all? Are there rules for that?
That's a great question. And to be honest, that's something that everyone's still trying to figure out. The research shows that for the most part, the ethical guidelines around AI are pretty thin and super vague. There are some schools bringing up concerns about data privacy, especially student data, and, potential FERPA violations.
FERPA, remind me what that is again?
Right, FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Basically, it's a law that protects, student records, keeps them private. So if a professor is plugging student work into some AI tool that could be a FERPA violation, there's a lot of gray area there. It definitely feels like, uncharted territory. But it's super interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So we've got universities figuring out how to use AI, how to keep students from misusing it, and now we've got this whole layer of ethical considerations. It seems like there are a lot of potential problems as everyone figures this out.
Totally. It's a lot to unpack. Now let's talk about something specific. STEM fields.
Okay. I feel like that's where AI would have the biggest impact, right? All that data analysis and coding and simulations. It seems like a natural fit.
You'd think so, right? But the research actually found something kind of surprising. Most universities are only just starting to look at how AI can be used in STEM education.
Really? That's not what I expected. What did they find?
Well, they found that, most universities mention AI in computer science courses. But when it comes to, other STEM fields, stuff like math, engineering, the natural sciences, the guidance on how to use AI is pretty surface level.
So they're acknowledging it's out there, but not really digging into how to use it.
Right. It's almost like they're dipping their toes in the water, but not ready to, jump in. Which makes you wonder, are they being too cautious? Or are there other things shaping STEM education that we're not seeing?
That's a question for another deep dive. But before we go there, you mentioned research before. We've talked about students using AI and professors using it to teach. But what about, using AI in the research itself?
Oh, that's a great point. And it's another area where the research shows there's a surprising lack of guidance. It's pretty rare to find a university policy that even mentions AI in the context of research, which is kind of alarming when you think about it.
Alarming? Why? What's the problem there?
Well, there are a lot of unknowns, right? For starters, there's the question of intellectual property. Let's say a researcher uses AI to analyze data or even, generate hypotheses. Who owns the results? Is it the researcher, the university, the company that made the AI tool? It's not clear.
Right. That makes sense.
And then there's the whole issue of data privacy and security, especially if researchers are working with, confidential information or even just personal data. Imagine if sensitive medical data got accidentally fed into some AI system with, bad security. It could be a disaster.
Yeah, that's a scary thought. So it sounds like universities have some catching up to do when it comes to AI and research. They need to come up with some clear guidelines, otherwise they could run into a whole bunch of problems down the road.
I agree. Now, this research covered a lot, but let's get into some specifics.
Okay, sounds good. What are some of the standout examples of how universities are dealing with all this AI stuff?
Well, one thing that really jumped out at me was just how different the approaches are. The research actually breaks them down into 4 main categories.
Oh, I like categories. Tell me more.
So the categories are based on 2 things: how much guidance the university gives to its professors and whether they're basically encouraging or discouraging AI use. So you've got universities that are super hands-on and encouraging AI use, and then you've got ones that are hands-on but trying to discourage it. And then you've got the same 2 categories, but with universities that are giving minimal guidance.
So it's a spectrum then. Some universities are all in, some are cautious, and some are somewhere in between.
Exactly. It totally depends on, how comfortable they are with AI and what their goals are. So to answer your question about standout examples, let's start with the high guidance, Encourage AI group. A good example there would be UC Davis. They're not just saying, hey, use AI. They're actually giving professors concrete ways to do it. They suggest using AI for brainstorming, drafting, even getting different perspectives on a topic.
That's really helpful. It's one thing to tell professors to use AI, but it's another to actually show them how.
Right. They're giving professors the tools and support they need to feel comfortable experimenting with AI. Then on the opposite end of the spectrum, in the high guidance Discourage AI group, you've got universities like Wayne State.
Okay, so they're actively trying to steer their faculty away from AI.
Well, not necessarily. It's not like they're banning it outright, but they're really pushing professors to design assignments that are harder for AI to, just cheat on. Remember those tactics we talked about earlier? Requiring personal reflections and stuff?
Right, making it harder for students to rely on AI.
Exactly. Wayne State is a good example of a university that's really leaning into those strategies.
That makes sense. What about the universities that are, giving less guidance? Are they just letting professors figure it all out on their own?
Not necessarily. Some of them are taking more of a wait-and-see approach. They acknowledge that AI is changing really fast, and they don't want to make policies that are going to be outdated in 6 months. So they're focusing more on general principles and encouraging conversations about AI, between faculty and students.
So it's more of a flexible approach then. They're not setting hard and fast rules.
Right. They're saying, let's talk about this, let's figure out the possibilities and the problems, and then we'll see what works best for us. Which, makes sense considering how quickly everything's changing with AI. Now, you mentioned earlier that some universities are doing a better job than others when it comes to, ethical guidelines. Can you give an example of a university that's doing it well?
Yeah, for sure. One that stood out to me was the University of Pittsburgh. They have this really thorough section on ethics in their AI policy. It covers everything from data privacy to intellectual property. They even give professors specific questions to consider when they're talking about these issues with their students.
Oh yeah, Pitt's great. They're not just saying be ethical. They're actually, giving professors concrete ways to handle those tricky ethical dilemmas. Now, another thing that really struck me about the research was how much emphasis there was on writing. It felt like almost every example of AI being used in the classroom was for some kind of writing assignment. Why do you think that is?
It's interesting, right? Because you think of AI and you think, coding or maybe data analysis, but writing doesn't immediately come to mind.
I think it's because writing is such a fundamental skill. It's not just about being good at English class. It doesn't matter if you're studying history or science or business. being able to write well is super important. So it makes sense that universities would be focused on how AI can help students become better writers.
That makes sense. Now, you also mentioned some concerns about equity, like making sure AI doesn't create, an uneven playing field. How are universities thinking about that?
Yeah, that's a really important point. Some universities are offering workshops or training to help students and faculty get up to speed on these AI tools. They're also looking into ways to give students access to AI software, especially if they can't afford it on their own.
That's good to hear. We don't want to create a situation where only the, wealthy students or the super tech savvy ones have access to this powerful stuff.
Exactly. It's a work in progress for sure, but it's good that universities are at least acknowledging the problem.
I agree. Now, we've talked a lot about how universities are approaching AI, the challenges, the opportunities, but there's this big question that everyone's wondering about.
You mean the question of whether AI is going to take over and make professors obsolete?
That's the one. Is it a legitimate fear or just hype?
I think it's important to separate the hype from reality. AI is a powerful tool, for sure, but it can't do everything that makes a great teacher great. It can't replace empathy or creativity or the ability to inspire students.
It's like the difference between reading a textbook and having a conversation with a passionate expert.
Exactly. So no, I don't think AI is going to replace professors anytime soon.
That's reassuring to hear. But do you think it will change how they do their jobs?
Oh, absolutely. Just like with any new technology, professors are going to have to adapt and learn how to use AI effectively.
So it's less about AI versus professors and more about AI and professors working together.
Exactly. And that's something that could actually be really positive. If professors embrace AI and figure out how to use it well, they can not only improve their own teaching, but also help their students develop the skills they need to succeed in a world where, AI is everywhere.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've covered a lot of ground here. Is there anything else we should highlight about how universities are approaching AI? Or should we move on to something else?
There's one more thing from the research that's worth talking about. It's about how relatively little attention is being paid to AI's impact on, STEM fields.
That is surprising. You'd think that STEM fields would be the ones leading the charge when it comes to AI, right?
Right. But the research suggests that they're actually being a bit more cautious about it.
Why do you think that is?
It's hard to say for sure, but there's definitely this concern that if students become too reliant on AI, it could lead to this black box mentality where they're just plugging numbers into a machine and getting answers without really understanding what's going on.
It's like using a calculator without knowing your times tables.
Exactly. And in fields like, engineering or medicine where mistakes can have really serious consequences, that kind of blind faith in AI could be dangerous. So universities seem to be trying to, strike a balance
between embracing AI's potential and making sure that students are still developing a deep understanding of their fields.
Exactly. It's not just about teaching them how to code or run simulations. It's about teaching them how to think like scientists and engineers, even as AI becomes more and more powerful.
That makes sense. Now, we've talked a lot about STEM, but what about, the arts and humanities? Could AI play a role there too?
That's a great question, and one that's causing a lot of debate. Some people argue that AI is fundamentally incompatible with the arts and humanities because those fields are all about, human expression and creativity and interpretation.
It's like the difference between a computer-generated painting and a masterpiece by, Van Gogh.
Exactly. But other people argue that AI can actually be a really valuable tool for artists and humanists. They say that AI can help them come up with new ideas, experiment with different ways of expressing themselves, and even create art that wouldn't be possible without AI.
So it's not about AI replacing human creativity. It's about AI and human creativity working together.
Right. And I think that's where the real potential is.
Okay, so we talked about how universities are both embracing and discouraging AI, but let's focus for a minute on the ones that are, trying to discourage students from relying too heavily on AI for their work. What are some of the most effective things they're doing?
Well, one thing that's becoming pretty popular is to focus on assignments that require students to connect what they're learning to, like real-world experiences, or to draw on their own personal insights. So instead of asking a question like, what are the causes of climate change? A professor might ask, how has climate change affected your local community?
So making it more personal and relevant to the student's own life.
Right. And that makes it a lot harder for a student to just plug the question into an AI. They actually have to think about it themselves and draw on their own experiences.
That's a good example. What else are professors doing?
Another common thing is to design assignments that focus on the process of learning rather than just the final product. So a professor might ask students to keep a learning journal, or to turn in multiple drafts of an essay, or even to give a presentation about how they did their research.
So it's like shifting the focus from what did you learn to how did you learn it?
Exactly. And that's something that AI can't really fake. It forces students to be actively involved in the learning process, to think about what they're doing, and to, reflect on what worked and what didn't.
It sounds like these strategies are all about encouraging deeper learning and critical thinking, which are definitely skills that are going to be even more important in an AI-powered world.
I agree. By pushing back against that temptation to just use AI as a shortcut, educators are actually helping students develop the skills they'll need to succeed in the long run.
Okay, so we've talked about the universities and how they're approaching AI, but let's not forget about the students in all of this. How are they reacting to this AI revelation in education?
That's a great question. And from what I've seen, students' reactions are just as, varied as the university policies. Some students are super excited about AI and the potential it has to make learning more personalized and engaging. Like, imagine having a tutor that's available 24/7 and that's tailored specifically to your needs. That's what some people are excited about.
Yeah, it's like having a customized learning experience at your fingertips.
Exactly. But other students are, a little more wary. They're worried about things like what AI means for privacy, or whether it's going to make education less human, less personal.
So it's a mix of excitement and apprehension then.
Definitely. And I think it's really important for educators to listen to those concerns and create a space for open and honest dialogue about the role of AI in education. We need to figure this out together, as a community, and create an educational experience that's both innovative and ethical.
I agree. Now, we've talked about students and universities, but let's not forget about the professors. How is AI changing how they teach, and what are some of the challenges and opportunities they're facing?
That's another really interesting aspect of all of this, right? AI is forcing professors to really rethink what it means to be a teacher in this rapidly changing world. On the one hand, AI can free up professors from some of the more, tedious tasks, like grading or giving basic feedback or grading those simple quizzes that frees them up to focus on, designing really engaging learning experiences or facilitating discussions or even just mentoring students one-on-one.
So it's like AI is taking over the role of the, teaching assistant, letting the professor focus on being more of a mentor or a guide.
Exactly. And that could be a really good thing, both for professors and students. But there are definitely challenges, too. Professors need to learn how to use all these new AI tools effectively. And they need to figure out how to design assessments that, can't be easily cheated on with AI. And, of course, they need to think about all the ethical considerations.
It's like professors are having to go back to school themselves, in a way.
In a way they are. But it's also a chance to, grow and innovate. If professors embrace the potential of AI, they can make their own teaching better. And they can help their students develop the skills they need to thrive in an AI-powered world.
That's a great point. Now, let's step back for a minute. What are some of the long-term trends we might see as AI becomes, more and more integrated into education? How do you think it will affect how we learn and even how we work in the future?
Ooh, that's a big question. It's tough to say for sure, but I think one trend we'll see is that the line between formal education and lifelong learning is going to get, blurrier and blurrier.
What do you mean by that?
Well, with all these AI-powered learning platforms popping up, it's easier than ever for people to learn new skills and, gain knowledge outside of traditional schools and universities. So that old model of go to school, get a degree, then get a job, it's becoming less and less relevant.
It's more like learn constantly, adapt all the time, and be ready to reinvent yourself multiple times throughout your career.
Exactly. And AI is only going to speed that process up. Another trend I think we'll see is that the skills that are uniquely human, the ones that AI can't easily replicate, those are going to become even more important.
So things like critical thinking, creativity, problem solving, emotional intelligence, all those things we've talked about.
Those are all great examples. The things that require human judgment and empathy and the ability to navigate, messy, complex situations, those are the skills that are going to be in high demand.
That's encouraging to hear. It sounds like even in an AI-powered world, human skills are still going to be super valuable. What else? Any other trends you think we should be paying attention to?
Yeah, I think we're also going to see a much bigger emphasis on ethics and responsibility when it comes to, developing and using AI.
So as AI gets more powerful, we need to make sure we're using it for good.
Exactly. And education has a huge role to play in that. We need to teach students not only how to use AI, but also how to think about its implications and, make sure it's being used responsibly. That's something we need to be talking about from day one.
That makes sense. So we've talked about how universities are approaching AI, how professors are adapting, what this means for students, and even some of the big picture implications for the future. Anything else we should cover before we move on?
Well, there's one area we haven't discussed yet, and that's personalized learning. You hear a lot of talk about AI being the key to, creating truly customized learning experiences for each student. What do you think about that?
Yeah, personalized learning seems to be the, holy grail in education these days. Everyone's talking about it.
There's definitely a lot of potential there, but I think we also need to be realistic about what AI can and can't do, you know?
What do you mean?
Well, AI is great at analyzing data, finding patterns, so it can be used to, track a student's progress, figure out where they're having trouble, and then suggest resources or activities that might help them.
So it's like having an AI teaching assistant that can personalize the learning experience for each student.
Right. But AI can't replace the role of a teacher when it comes to really understanding, the whole student, their motivations, their struggles, what they want to achieve.
So it's not about replacing teachers with AI, it's about using AI to help teachers be more effective.
Exactly. It's about AI and teachers working together to create the best possible learning experience for each student. But we also need to talk about the potential downsides of personalized learning, right?
What do you mean? I thought the whole point of personalized learning was to create a better experience for each student.
It is, but there's also the risk that, if we're not careful, AI could end up narrowing students' learning experiences instead of expanding them.
How so?
Well, if AI is constantly tailoring everything to a student's existing interests, they might miss out on opportunities to be exposed to new ideas or different perspectives. It's like those filter bubbles you get on social media, where you're only seeing information that you already agree with.
Right. It's like being stuck in an echo chamber.
Exactly. So I think it's important to strike a balance. We need to use AI to personalize learning, but we also need to make sure that students are still getting exposed to a wide range of ideas and perspectives, even if those ideas are, challenging or uncomfortable.
So personalized version is good, but it's not a magic bullet. We still need to be mindful of its limitations.
Totally. And that brings up another important point. We can't talk about AI in education without talking about the potential for AI to actually make existing inequalities worse.
Right. That's something we need to be really careful about. We don't want to create a system where AI is only benefiting the already privileged.
Absolutely. So what are some of the specific challenges we need to be thinking about in terms of equity and access, and what can we do to address them?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is simply, access to technology. Not every student has a computer at home or high-speed internet or can afford the latest AI software. And this is especially true for, students from low-income families or students in rural areas or students with disabilities.
It's like the digital divide, but it's even more pronounced when we're talking about AI.
Exactly. So how do we fix that?
Well, there are a few things we can do. One is to provide subsidized internet access or loan-out devices, especially to students who meet them. Another is to create, community learning centers where students can go to use computers and get help with their schoolwork.
That makes sense. So making sure that everyone has the basic tools they need to participate in an AI-powered world.
Right. And then there's the issue of, digital literacy. Even if students have access to the technology, they need to know how to use it effectively. And that means more than just, basic computer skills. Students need to understand how AI works, how to evaluate the information it gives them, and how to use it responsibly.
So it's not enough to just give students a computer and say, okay, now you're ready for the AI revolution. We need to teach them how to think critically about AI and use it in a way that's beneficial.
Exactly. And that requires a whole different kind of curriculum, one that focuses on digital literacy, critical thinking skills, and ethical decision-making when it comes to using AI.
It's about empowering students to be informed and responsible users of AI, not just passive consumers.
Exactly, right? It's about more than just knowing how to, turn a computer on and off. Students need to be able to really understand how AI works, how to look at the information it gives them and decide if it's reliable and how to use it responsibly.
So it's not just about teaching students how to use AI, but also teaching them how to think critically about AI.
Exactly. And that's a whole other ballgame, right? We need a whole new curriculum, one that really emphasizes things like digital literacy and critical thinking.
That makes a lot of sense. What about the issue of bias in these AI systems? How can we be sure that AI is being used to make education more equitable, not just making existing inequalities worse?
Yeah, that's a huge challenge for sure. I think awareness is the first step. We need to be actively looking for bias in these systems.
So being proactive and trying to catch these problems before they get too big.
Right. And that could mean, doing audits of these AI systems to see how they're working for different groups of students. And then, actually looking at the data to see if there are any differences in outcomes that are unfair.
Okay, so we're looking for bias. And then what? What do we do if we find it?
Well, if we find bias, we got to fix it. And there are a few ways to do that. We can tweak the algorithms, retrain the AI with more diverse data, or even, go back to the drawing board and design new AI systems that are built with fairness in mind from the very beginning.
So it's about making sure these AI systems are actually reflecting our values when it comes to things like fairness and equality.
Exactly. It's about moving away from this idea that AI is somehow neutral and recognizing that it can actually, pick up and amplify the biases that already exist in our society. Now, you mentioned earlier that too much AI could lead to a one-size-fits-all approach to education. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, that was something that really stuck with me. It seems kind of counterintuitive, right? Because you think of AI as being all about personalization, but you're saying it could actually lead to less individualization in education.
Right. It's like one of the potential downsides of AI is that if we let it make too many decisions about what students learn, how they're assessed, then we risk creating a learning experience that's like super standardized and cookie cutter.
It's like if you went to a restaurant and they only had one dish on the menu. Everyone gets the same thing, whether they like it or not.
Exactly. AI is really good at seeing patterns and making predictions, but it's not as good as a human teacher when it comes to understanding each student's individual needs and strengths and, all the things that make them unique.
So how do we avoid that trap? How do we make sure that AI is being used to make learning more individualized, not less?
Well, I think it comes down to finding that sweet spot between personalization and exposure to new ideas. We need to use AI in a way that allows students to explore different perspectives and, maybe even challenge their own assumptions.
So it's about more than just giving students what they already like or what they already think.
Right. It's about pushing them to grow and become, more well-rounded thinkers. Now, we've talked a lot about how AI might change the learning side of things, but what about the teaching side? How do you think AI will change what it means to be a teacher?
Yeah, that's a question a lot of teachers are asking these days. What does the future hold for us?
It's a great question, and I think it's one that everyone's still trying to figure out. I do think that AI is going to have a big impact on, the day-to-day work of being a teacher.
You think AI will replace teachers altogether?
I don't think so, at least not anytime soon. AI can automate certain tasks, sure, like grading multiple choice quizzes or providing basic feedback on, grammar and spelling. But it can't replace those uniquely human qualities that great teachers bring to the classroom. The empathy, the creativity, the passion for their subject. That's what really makes learning come alive.
It's the difference between, watching a video lecture and having a conversation with someone who really knows and loves their subject.
Right. So no, I don't think AI is going to make teachers obsolete, but I do think it's going to change how they do their jobs.
So teachers aren't going to be replaced, but they are going to need to adapt.
Exactly. Teachers will need to learn how to use AI tools effectively, how to use them for things like personalizing lessons, providing feedback, and treating assessments. But they'll also need to focus on developing those skills that AI can't replicate, like fostering creativity, critical thinking, and collaboration.
So it's not AI versus teachers. It's AI and teachers working together as a team.
Exactly. And I think that's a really powerful idea. This partnership between humans and technology could really transform education in some amazing ways. Now, speaking of the future, what advice would you give to students who are trying to navigate this whole AI revolution? What should they be focusing on?
Yeah, that's a good question. What skills or mindsets do students need to develop to be successful in this new world where AI is becoming more and more prevalent?
Well, I would say the most important thing is to be curious. Don't be afraid to experiment with these AI tools and explore how they can be used to, make learning more effective and more engaging.
So embrace the technology, but do it with a critical eye.
Exactly. It's important for students to understand how AI works, what its limitations are, and how it can be used ethically. And at the same time, they should be working on developing those uniquely human skills that are going to be in high demand in the future. Critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, communication.
A blend of technical skills and those essential human skills.
Absolutely. Those human skills are going to be valuable no matter what career path students choose, and no matter how much technology changes the world of work.
That's good to hear. Now, we've covered a lot of ground today. The good, the bad, the ethical dilemmas, the potential for AI to both enhance and disrupt education. Any final thoughts before we move on to the last part of our deep dive?
I think the biggest takeaway is that we're really just at the beginning of this whole AI revolution in education. The future is still being written, and it's up to all of us to, make sure the future is one where AI is used to benefit everyone.
So stay informed, stay engaged, and don't be afraid to speak up and share your thoughts and ideas.
Exactly. The choices we make today about how we use AI in education are going to have a big impact on the kind of world we create for ourselves and for future generations. So let's make sure we're making those choices thoughtfully and with, a focus on equity and inclusion.
Well said. Now I'm excited to move on to the last part of our deep dive, where we're going to explore how AI is being used in specific subject areas. But first, a quick break.
So we were talking about AI being used in like psych and sociology and econ to crunch all that data and spot trends.
Right, and to, test those theories. For example, psychologists are using AI to look at facial expressions and body language to try to figure out, like, what people are really feeling, even if they're not saying it. And sociologists are using AI to study social networks and figure out those patterns of, like, how we interact with each other.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing stuff. And economists are using it to build better models for predicting, what's going to happen with the economy and to see how different policies might affect things.
So it's all about using AI to get a deeper, more like data-driven understanding of those big, complex social and economic questions.
Exactly. Now, how about those professional fields like law and medicine? How is AI changing things up there?
Yeah, I'm curious about that too. Those fields seem so, I don't know, human-centered. It's hard to imagine AI having a big impact there.
Well, you might be surprised. AI is being used in some really different ways. Like in law, it's being used to do things like legal research, sifting through all those cases and precedents. And it's also being used to analyze contracts and even predict how court cases might turn out. This is freeing up lawyers to focus on more like strategic thinking and client counseling.
So it's taking over some of the more tedious and time-consuming tasks.
Right. And then in medicine, it's being used to analyze medical images, like x-rays and scans, to help doctors diagnose diseases earlier and more accurately. And it can even help develop personalized treatment plans, taking into account a patient's individual medical history and genetic makeup.
Wow. So AI is playing a role in both, like, diagnosing and treating diseases.
It is, and these are just a few examples. Really, we're just starting to scratch the surface of what's possible with AI in these fields. As the technology continues to evolve, we can expect to see even bigger changes in the years to come.
It's kind of mind-blowing, right? AI isn't just changing how we do things in these fields, it's changing how we think about these fields.
I think that's a really important point. AI is pushing us to question our assumptions about what's possible, to consider new approaches, and to be more creative and innovative in our work. It's a really exciting time to be working in these fields.
It definitely sounds like it. Now, before we wrap up, I want to circle back to the issue of ethics. We've touched on some of the broad ethical considerations, but are there any specific ethical challenges that come up when we're talking about AI being used in different academic disciplines?
That's a great question, and it's one that I think more and more people are starting to ask as AI becomes more integrated into various fields. One of the biggest challenges, and we've talked about this before, is the issue with bias. If the data that's used to train an AI system is biased, the AI's output will also be biased. And this is especially worrying in fields like criminal justice or healthcare, where biased decisions can have really serious real-world consequences.
Right. So if an AI system that's used to help judges make sentencing decisions is trained on data that reflects existing racial biases in the criminal justice system, it could end up perpetuating those biases and leading to unfair outcomes.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to ensure that the data used to train AI systems is diverse, representative, and free from bias. We need to be very careful about where that data comes from and how it's collected and used.
Okay, what about other ethical challenges?
Another big one is transparency. A lot of these AI systems are what we call black boxes, meaning we don't really know how they're making their decisions. This could be a problem in fields like medicine, where it's really important to understand the reasoning behind a diagnosis or a treatment recommendation.
So it's not enough for an AI system to be accurate. It also needs to be explainable so that humans can understand how it's arriving at its conclusions and, feel confident in its recommendations.
Exactly. We need to be able to trust these AI systems, and that trust is built on transparency. We need to develop systems that are both accurate and transparent so we can understand how they work and identify potential problems.
Okay, so bias and transparency are two big ethical challenges. Are there any others that are specific to using AI in certain fields, like the arts or the humanities?
Yeah, I think in those fields, one of the concerns is that AI could devalue human creativity and originality. Like if an AI can create a painting or write a poem that's just as good as something a human could create, will we start to see human creativity as less valuable?
That's a really interesting question. It makes you think about, what is art? And what does it mean to be creative in a world where machines can create things that were once considered uniquely human?
Exactly. These are some pretty deep philosophical questions that we're going to have to grapple with as AI becomes more sophisticated. And then there's the whole issue of AI's impact on employment. As AI starts to automate more tasks that were previously done by humans, are we going to see massive job losses? Or will new jobs emerge to replace the ones that are lost?
Those are big questions, and ones that we need to be thinking about now, not later, right?
Absolutely. It's not enough to just develop the technology. We also need to be thinking about the societal implications, the economic impacts, and how we can make sure that everyone benefits from these advances in AI, not just a select few.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential benefits of AI in different disciplines, but also some of the ethical challenges. Any final thoughts before we wrap up this deep dive?
I think the most important thing to remember is that the future of AI in education is not predetermined. It's something that we're all creating together right now through the choices we make and the conversations we have. So stay informed, stay engaged, and keep asking those tough questions.
That's a great message to end on. Thank you so much for joining us today for this fascinating conversation about AI in higher education. It's a complex and rapidly evolving topic, and I think we've just scratched the surface. But hopefully this deep dive has given our listeners a good starting point for their own exploration.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, we encourage you to keep learning, keep exploring, and keep questioning. The future of education is in our hands, and it's up to all of us to make sure that AI is used to create a more just, equitable, and enriching learning experience for everyone. That's a wrap on another deep dive. Until next time, keep diving deeper and keep learning.